Ladies and gentlemen, in today's video, I am going to be doing a fascinating deep dive into one of the most underappreciated elements of the game of chess and how it has changed the game of chess forever. And I'm not necessarily sure it has changed it in a positive way. Now, before we get into the games today, not a sponsored segment, you don't have to skip ahead. Many of you who have been watching my videos a lot know that my new book, which is standing there on a poster board behind me, is coming out in 8 days on October the 24th. I also have a copy right here. And to celebrate the launch of the new book, I'm doing live fan book events around New York City. On October 24th, November 4th, I'm going to be doing Guess the ELO live. I'm going to be meeting fans, doing Q&A, signing all of your books. Check out the links in the description. A lot of very, very fun stuff coming up, including an event where you can get free ice cream. It'll be at an ice cream shop called Catch an Ice Cream Shop by the very awesome Dylan LeMay. Anyway, all of that will be in the description. You have a chance to meet me if you're going to be in town or if you live around these parts. Let's jump into this little obscure element of chess that could affect the way it is played for many generations. Now, this all begins in 2021 with a game that Magnus Carlsen played. And the concept that I want you to focus on in this video is chess in the age of information and digitalization. Back in the day, 1970s, 40s, whatever, a chess game would be played. It would be watched and listened to on the radio maybe, and then it would be analyzed for weeks with no computers, and development was slow. Now take a look at this game. This is 2021. Magnus's opponent is Vladislav Artemyev, a Russian grandmaster. It's a Sicilian defense, and Magnus plays pawn to c3 with the idea of playing pawn to d4. Now he could have done that earlier, but that is a very different type of Sicilian, and black might have attacked his center pawn right away. This is known as the Alpin, played many, many, many times. The move c3 on this move is okay, but after d5, white's got a bit of an issue here, having to deal with what's in the center. Now, historically, white would take in this position and then play this move pawn to d4, and the position's about balanced. However, Magnus played e5, okay? Now just focus on this for a moment for me, okay? Artemyev played d4. This is 2021. Up until that point in history, most people in this position would play bishop d3 and castle because they didn't want the pawn to block their position, and the bishop could always slide there. Also, what people would do in this position is they would take this pawn and give a check and trade this bishop for one of the pieces on these squares. Magnus was the first player in 2021 to play pawn to d3. Now he wasn't the first player in human history, but he was the first top player. And when top players play something in chess, we all watch. We go, oh, they've got a new idea. What is the new idea? Because you're obviously blocking your own bishop and you're blocking your own knight. So what gives? The idea was to develop the bishop this way, anticipating the opening of the diagonal. But you might be wondering, what about this pawn? Black will just develop and win the pawn with knight to g6. Now, in this game in particular, Artemyev played pawn to g6, which the computer did not like. And he decided to attack the center pawn like this. And after Magnus defended himself, he got a very strong hold on the position, and he slowly built up his forces and tried to launch some sort of attack. Now, what's interesting about this game is that it was utter total chaos. The point of this video is not this game. We will click through it because Magnus played it. He did build up a very, very big attack on the king side, and he had a lot of space, but it was a rapid game, and it got very crazy, and Artemyev created monster counterplay on the other side of the board, and, you know, Magnus was, I think, like, completely lost a little bit, then he was saving the day, potentially. Look at this, the position is back to equal. It was, you know, a completely ridiculous game of chess that actually Artemyev went on to win, even though it was a draw because Magnus hung his queen. So that's not the point of the video. The point of the video is that Magnus was the first person to do this at high level. Pawn to d3, g3, bishop g2. Now, the way chess works historically, is people would go and they would analyze, why did black go here and not here? Because who is going to guard the pawn in white's position? Queen e2, queen c7. The pawn is going to get taken. And if white plays bishop f4, he's just giving up a bishop in the early stage of the game. And that's the point. Fast forward a little bit. This is a game played on September 28th, 2023. This is a game played on October 10th, 2023. This is a game played on October 13th, 2023. And this is a game played on October 14th. And one thing that you are going to realize about these positions, my friends, is that this position happens in every single one of these games. Chess has never had this level of information being pumped into it at once. The average 9-year-old in the year 2023 probably knows more about chess than the best players of the 20th century, which is fascinating. I don't know if stuff like that exists in other sports. I don't know if other sports or activities, and by activities, I mean, like, let's say poker. Poker strategy and all the quantitative stuff, like all of that is evolving at a very different level. In tennis, maybe the rackets, I don't even know. In soccer or football, there's the ball, like there's science about the ball. I can't speak about this stuff for other sports. But it's crazy because back in the day, it would have taken 20 years for somebody to do research about this. In 2 weeks' time, watch as all of this evolves. It's so fascinating. So this was a game played at the World Junior Championship, September 28th, 2023. Mind you, this position has been getting played hundreds of times online. Online, entitled Tuesday and online events. So Jan Subel, I want to say Subelj, but I know how that's not how you pronounce it. It's like Subelj, I don't know. But he's a Slovenian grandmaster, young guy, playing against Rudik Makaryan, who's a 2550 rated international master from Russia. Rudik played this, and there you go, my friends. The knight has arrived on g6. The big question is, how is white going to defend himself? Queen to c7, the pawn is going to fall. Apparently, white's idea is knight to a3. What? The big idea is to just give the pawn away. So this whole idea by Magnus, maybe, remember what Artemiev did? Artemiev went here. He never gave Magnus an opportunity to even show what the idea was. But now we get to see what the idea is. The idea is to just lose the pawn. Okay, knight takes e5. Knight takes. Now, if knight takes e5, then white will pin. And then black will need to defend himself, but that will walk into the knight. Oh, now we are seeing the idea of putting the knight there. Also, if bishop f4, f6, which kind of looks nice, white will just very quickly start firing away. And even though black won a pawn in the opening, black tied their shoes together. So instead of that, black goes here, and this is the point. Bishop to e4. You would never in a million years understand the idea of these moves. Never. The point is to lose more pawns. You're now down 2 pawns. Well, now you castle. And now, if black takes another pawn, you have a roaring attack. The queen can go all the way back, but the knight will hit the queen. f4 and f5 will continue to attack, and black can't move the bishop. Black can't move the bishop because the pawn is being defended by the bishop, and now white's rooks are going to come, and white's knight is going to come into the center as well. This is a crazy position. So this is the point. Rudik Makaryan was completely on his own. He took on c3, and then he played this move f5, trying to kick out white's bishop and get a queen trade. White said no queen trade. Queen to f6, the bishop slid back, and from an opening, white enjoyed a very, very, very healthy attack. h4, black castled. His knight was pushed to the corner of the board, but as it so happens, h5 is not the best move. As it so happens, the best move in this position is actually to take back the pawn. Who knows? Who knows why? I don't know why. Apparently, overextending is like this attack. It's like Teddy Roosevelt said. U.S. president, speak softly and carry a big stick. This is the big stick. You can play h5 at any point, but then I'm going to play rook b1, a4, a5. I'm going to move my bishop to one of the diagonals, right? But he went like this, and Rudik got his knight back into the game, but white still had good pressure. Rudik took the center, knight takes, and we had a massive fall off of all the pieces from the board, where black emerged in an overall probably equal position. But he had to defend himself for a long time, and white definitely enjoyed some menacing pressure. White has 3 on 2. Black has this weak pawn. This game went 63 moves. That is not the point of the video. You see, it's a 2-on-1 pawn endgame. So white had the advantage basically from start to finish. A lot of pressure, but unfortunately this endgame is likely a draw because that's just how chess works. Only 1 pawn advantage. It's not going to work. It took 63 moves and the game ended in a draw. But again, instant replay, pawn to d3. What happens if black accepts the pawn and then just buckles down and defends? The position was unpleasant, but white could have pressured a little bit. Now, Hans Niemann in the United States Chess Championship saw that game. Back in the day, this would have taken months to analyze in this level of depth without the engine. So Hans decided, I'm going to play this against Levon Aronian, a very strong Armenian grandmaster now in the United States. Levon played a move that is scoring 90% for black. Levon did not move his knight to c6. He played here. So Levon played this slightly differently. Played it slightly differently than the other game. Knight to e7, g3, pawn takes. So a very different approach. He is not going after this pawn. This approach by black is instead of going for the pawn on e5, which white is offering up as basically a gambit. The idea by black is to go for this pawn because he knows this bishop is going to go to g2. A fascinating and very, very provocative approach. We haven't yet built enough experience in these positions. And as you can see from the computer is not impressed. The computer is not impressed. In fact, the computer in situations like this wants black to do something like bishop c6. It wants to keep the pawn in the center and put the bishop on c6 and put the knight behind it and then put the knight on f5. This is yet another way to play this position, but we don't know what the best way is. That's my point. We don't know. Chess is constantly evolving. A guy moves a pawn 1 square on move 5, and apparently we've just uncovered an entire, fossil field, like an archaeologist. It's incredible stuff. So Levon does it this way. Hans now has to play a completely unique position. I mean, his pawns are not standing at all like they were in this game, right? From the opening. I mean, this is not the same at all. But it took a tabia. It went slightly differently. He puts his queen on e2. He's going to probably put his knight on the center. And Levon just attacked him. So Levon did not want to sit around being put under pressure. And he instead attacked Hans. Now, I'm not sure he's in a position to call the shots, because his king is in the center of the board. You really got to be sure that this attack is going to work. Hans basically ignored Levon, and Levon just kept going. He took his bishop off of the board to remove white's knight from the center, and then Hans said, okay, g4. I mean, I'm castled, so you are not in a position to call the shots against me. Knight to d4. Now, with this pawn clogging the black position, right? You are not able to put a knight or a queen there. The bishop can't really do anything if it gets to c5. Now Hans starts restricting Levon on all 3 sides. He's pressuring him here. Castling here is going to lead into a monster attack, so you don't want to do that. You also don't want to leave in the king in the center, and if you castle this way, you castle directly into a rook and a queen. So very difficult to decide exactly what to do, but Levon decides to castle queenside. He might survive, he might not. Hans has eyes here, eyes on the pawn behind, and eyes on that pawn. I mean, it is a very scary position for black, and Hans puts his king on f1 out of harm's way, and the attack is just about to barrel through. I mean, 10 points of material at b7, queen and bishop staring this way. The knight could go to f3, g4, f6, or h6 to pressure f7, and my friends, Levon has to give away a knight. He has to give away a knight not to get checkmated. He does have a little bit of counterplay with the rooks, and the bishop does look very, very scary. But Hans sacrifices the rook to get the bishop and the knight for it, and he's just got a cocoon for his king. White now has tremendous pressure for the rest of the game. He's just going to pry apart black's defenses. He has to make sure he doesn't get checkmated now that that's safe. And Hans Niemann goes on to beat Levon Aronian. 2742 FIDE rated player. Hans manages to grab the pawns. Black has absolutely nothing left. Knight f4, knight e6. And Levon resigns because he's going to lose his pawns and white is going to queen. And that is how chess evolves. A guy plays in a slightly different way, and now we are going to know how to handle this position if black does not play knight to c6. Now, I will remind you how this game went. Knight e7, bishop g2. Black played the most critical approach, calling the bluff on the entire white position. We now fly from this game in Mexico, this game in St. Louis, we now fly to Qatar. The Qatar Masters, Anish Giri versus Aditya Mittal. And this is actually really why, in my opinion, this might be incredible for chess, because chess knowledge is now everywhere and everybody can learn from it. But chess is also becoming a memory game. Skill versus memory is tilting in one direction or another. And that's the fascinating thing about it. That is almost why speeding it up into rapid and blitz format really might determine who's more skilled. And Chess 960, the version of chess where the back rank is shuffled of pieces, right? Now, knight c6, this game will absolutely blow your mind. Aditya Mittal is a young grandmaster from India, rated 2572. Look at this position. We have already seen this position. In that game, Rudik played knight takes e5. I will remind you, knight e5, knight e5, knight e5. Excuse me. Queen e5, bishop to e4. Now, Aditya plays the top computer move, bishop to d7. We have not seen this move before. Let's watch. Knight b5. Anish spent 10 minutes on that move. 10 minutes on this move, right? Aditya, queen b8, instant. Now the queen eyes the pawn. Black is going to get kicked out of the position. Black is going to kick white's knight out of the position. White now can take on d4, but he's going to lose on e5. Pawn takes d4 played by Anish. Aditya immediately responds with the top computer move. Now, white has the option here to play knight d6 check to try to grab that bishop or come back. Anish comes back. Pawn takes d4, played instantly by Aditya. No thinking whatsoever. Anish thinks, plays knight to c4. Now, black gives a check. That was the entire idea all along, but certainly black is not going to give up his dark squared bishop because this knight is going to go to d6 and pressure that king. That is exactly what he does. He doesn't even think. Bishop takes d2, top computer move. White plays king takes. King takes d2, because if he took with anything else, he would lose sight of that pawn. Two knights and a queen, and two knights and a queen stare at the pawn on e5. So Aditya knows all of this. He knows all of this because he saw this game and because he saw this game. This is chess in the age of information and digitalization. This man, with his analysis before this game, knows all the best moves. He knows all the best moves from all of these games. Rook a7, he doesn't even think about the move. Rook to a7. In this position, black can castle. Black can play queen c7. Black can play rook a7. And he plays rook a7 without even thinking, inviting this check. Because the king is just going to go here, and this pawn is destabilized. Rook to a7 played. Now Anish plays a4 after thinking 13 more minutes. He is now down 48 minutes on the clock. 48! Aditya plays b5. Finally, he thinks on his own. On his 17th move. The move a4 is a move that is not recommended at the top level by the computer. There's knight d6, there's knight b6. a4 apparently walks directly into b5, but Anish just needed to do something so his opponent didn't have the entire damn game memorized. So he went here, and now black is the one calling the shots. Both guys move their king, but they're actually safe because the queens are so far away. Black is threatening to take here, and now h4 to try to kick the knight out. The queen goes to a8, applying a level of pressure to the rook. Rook a7, queen a7, and pawn to f6, and Aditya is just removing this pawn. I mean, he's just trying to remove the pawn completely so that the knight on d6 is loose. Takes. If king takes d6, it's probably too dangerous. fg, knight g5, the king is a bit weak, so just pawn takes. The knight's gotta go. And black just centralizes and starts firing at white's king. White's king can't escape. King d1. And this game actually goes down into an endgame of knights and bishops. Aditya pressures Anish literally the entire game, but the game ends in a draw because you're not going to be able to win white's pawns without losing your own, and it's too equal, and the players agree to a draw. But the craziest thing about this game is this move, bishop to d7. This man knew this move. He knew this move because he saw the game that Rudik played, and that is chess now. So much of chess is this man knew 16 moves of theory in something that I don't think has ever been played before. Literally. I mean, it's staggering at which pace chess is being developed. Games are being played as you are watching this video all across the world by very, very good players. Somebody is looking at those games. All of those games, by the way, are being prepared and played by people who have access to these supercomputers. These supercomputers that can come up with these absurd lines where white gets this blockade on the queen, where black plays 17 moves of theory and the king is just out in the open on d2. The very next day, at this very tournament in Qatar, I'm not even exaggerating, the next day, that game was October 13th, this is October 14th. A game between Ilyas, Msellek, and Eric Rosen, beloved chess streamer and commentator and friend of mine. And Eric got hit with this. His opponent might have thought, this guy is not going to know it. Back in the day, you would need so much time to analyze these things. Games used to be adjourned. They didn't even finish chess games back in the day. Now you look at that one game and you know what to do. Look at this. Look at this. You are not going to believe your eyes. Bishop g2, knight g6, queen c7. It's all the same thing. It is all the same thing. Pawn takes d4. a6. Knight to a3. Pawn takes d4. Knight to c4. Bishop to b4. Bishop d2. My friends, it is the exact same game. I am not exaggerating. Look at the position. None of these guys have spent any time. Look at this. Anish Giri spent 40 minutes getting to this position. 30 minutes. These guys, they just pre-moved the whole thing. They didn't even need to because they knew all the best moves. Now, Anish Giri spent a lot of time in this position, played a4. This was not the best move. The best move, according to the computer, maybe at some depth, might be h4. Might be a4, right? So, in this game, h4, and now the players are on their own. Watch the absolute... These guys put on a fight between two heavyweight fighters that were out of stamina. I love Eric. This game was so crazy because white just wants to go here. The lines are so complicated. B5 castles. Eric plays h5 after spending 6 minutes, and apparently it's a huge mistake. But how do you know that? The only way you know that is if you do tons of analysis prior, because it's a weakness, because now white's knight can go to g5 and queen h5 at all times. So you should have just apparently accepted h5. So h5, rook c1, pawn to f6 trying to fight back in the center. Now white plays a4, giving up the pawn on e5 completely. Eric doesn't take the pawn, instead plays b5. What is going on? The king is in the open. There's pawns all over the board. Knight d6 check. King goes to e7. Pawn takes here. Exactly like in the Giri game, by the way. Exactly what happened in the Anish game. Look at this. Knight d6 and the same motif. Pawn takes f6, giving up the knight. It happens in this game as well because taking it is too dangerous. Knight to g5 and pressure here, knight to f7. Incredible how the overlap happens, right? And this is a game just played 24 hours later. Pawn takes f6. AB. The king now takes the knight. Eric grabs the knight and says, I don't believe you. I don't believe you because if you take, I have queen b. I don't believe you. Queen takes b2. White sacrifices the rook in the corner of the board. Oh my God. Queen takes a1. Eric is now up 5 points of material, but he loses the bishop. The queen is staring. The rook is staring. The pawn is about to become another queen. Queen a5 check, king to d1. Eric might go for repetition here, but he plays here. He grabs the pawn. He grabs the pawn, and now white sacrifices the rook. Rook to c6. The idea of this move is to attract black's king like a magnet away from the pawn on e6. And when that pawn falls, black's position is going to be in dire straits. But before we even take that pawn, we play knight takes. You attract the king into a double check of two pieces. With one move, you have activated both the knight and the bishop. And anywhere black goes, he's in huge trouble. King going here. There's queen e6. You run here. I take the rook. I also have a fork. So you've got to find the best way to protect your king. King c7. Eric's got 30 seconds on the clock. Queen c2. Queen c6. Queen e6. And in this position, instead of taking the rook in one move and setting up knight e6, white had to stay patient. Because if here you take this with check and then you keep pillaging. If rook f7, then you have knight e6 and checkmate in a couple of moves. And if king here, you have queen g6, and you keep pillaging. But instead of that, he grabbed the rook, and Eric is able to swoop into the back rank and find a queen sacrifice! A defensive queen sacrifice, because if this, then this. Oh my goodness. So white cannot accept the queen, and it's one of the most absurd repetitions you will ever see, and the guys end with a draw. And you know what's going to happen after this game? That position, after e4, c5, knight f3, e6, c3, d5, e5, d4, d3, knight c6, g3, knight e7, bishop g2, knight g6, queen e2, queen e7, knight a3, bishop g7, knight b5, queen b8, c d4, a6, knight a3, c d4, knight d4, bishop b4, bishop d2, bishop, take, rook a7. Now there is going to be another game in the database with a move played on the 16th move where white tries to prove if they have an advantage. And if it doesn't work, they're gonna have to go back and think, is there anything here for white? Is there anything else that white can do? In this position, instead of knight b5, can you play h4 right now? Can you play another move right now? Can you castle? Can you put the knight on c4 and then after b5, bring the knight back here and try to... I don't know. I don't know. But that is how chess works. In the span of 2 weeks, we got an entire exploration into a variation that nobody had even thought about before 2021, when it just so happened that Magnus played it in a game. And it doesn't have to be Magnus. I did not make this video because Magnus did this in 2021. This happens all the time. All the time. A move is made that is slightly different, with a slightly different plan. A pawn sacrifice in the center, with long-term complications. And suddenly everybody goes there. And the reason why this is incredible for chess is because more information is now publicly available than ever before. Chess players are better than they are ever in history. Not even close. Not even close. But is chess just becoming a memory game? Should we speed it up? Because if you have 90 minutes on the clock, it's not the same anymore as having 15. 15 minutes on the clock might very well indicate who is a better chess player. Playing Fischer random with a back row shuffled could very well indicate who is the better chess player. I don't know. I would love to know your thoughts. And that's all I have for you today. Get out of here.